very Sydney specific. If you're from Sydney, have a business that relates to Sydney, put your hand up. It's almost everyone. So I think I'm pretty safe ground to talk about what I'm going to talk about now. So I kind of consider this a bit of an industry update. For those of you who have been living under a rock for some time, we've got a few issues here in Sydney. Lockout is a good acronym that describes a lot of things restricting what I would describe as a desirable level of trade in Sydney, affecting hospitality, of course, but also our wider nighttime economy. And nighttime economy, for those of you who aren't familiar with the phrase, and I say that because 18 months ago, nobody was talking about nighttime economy in Sydney. It's the income largely generated between after from 6 p.m. through to 6 a.m. in a city. And it is not only from hospitality, but all those good things, arts, culture, theatre, live performance, music, but also the supply chains that sit behind that. And so when confronted with lockout, which unfortunately has reduced the discussion around Sydney's nightlife to a very polarised one, which was really confined by the language of police, violence, alcohol and health, and when you especially looked at the stakeholder groups in that, hospitality being a key one, but also the alcohol companies, that's an argument that's very hard to win if that's how you're going to debate it. Because, and despite the numerous attempts to demonstrate the positive benefits from alcohol, when confronted by the medical counter argument and obviously the views of police, you're somewhat constrained. And so this is by way of background, because in order to break that deadlock, a number of city leaders came to the view that we needed to change that conversation. And therefore, the language of nighttime economy, it's good because it's a different conversation. It's bad because it's such a big conversation and it's complicated, tricky to have, involves many stakeholders. It became somewhat easier in February this year after a bit of campaigning from a few people in the room. And when Deloitte released a report which clocked the opportunity cost of Sydney's nighttime economy as $16 billion. That's billion with a B. A large number, I would suggest. And helpfully, on one analysis, TimeOut, which I'm the MD of, rated Sydney's nightlife 48 out of 48 cities in the world globally of all the cities surveyed. And this is a survey of 34,000 people, included 1,600 people in Sydney. And Melbourne, in contrast, I think in terms of was a similar sample set. And on the lifestyle rating came in much higher. And this is the stuff TimeOut cares about, which for many people in the room is highly aligned, going out and having fun, but actually just being alive and I guess being able to engage in civic life. And so these two things came out in February and sort of said to a few people, look, we've got a major problem here, we need to fix it. And I say a few people because unfortunately, and this is the hard part for those of us who are campaigning hard day in, day out, is that it still doesn't rate that high on the list of priorities for our elected government. That's just the brutal truth. But all that is, when you think about it, is a challenge to say, well, let's make it rate higher, I think. And that's really what we've been trying to do. So prior to the election, the industry body, Nighttime Industry Association, formed, and it welcomes members from across that full range of our nighttime, and some high-profile ones at that. Justine Baker from Solitel has really spearheaded this and backed it from the get-go. But these days we have Rockpool Group, Australian Venue Co, specific to hospitality, but also Sydney Theatre Company, Australian Chamber Orchestra, APRA, Live Music Office, and that list just continues to grow. Live Nation joined us the other day, and it has been really an exercise in trying to assemble a great cross-section of businesses from the nighttime economy to say to government, this shit matters. So we campaigned ahead of the election, and stories for another time. When I get the 20-minute time slot, I can go into that. But someone said, have you seen the film Fire Festival? This is just before I put on a fundraiser at the Metro. And I was like, No, I've heard about it. I'm definitely not watching it before I do this because this is going to happen. It did happen. A few grey hairs. And famously, we did a strike in the small bars the day before the election, which added a few more grey hairs because on that day the warring political parties, Libs, decided to call a flag on our plane, question its legality, and it was really just an attempt to stifle the action because they were worried about it potentially impacting the election result. Which again, when I hear that, I'm like, good, because now we're going to go harder at that, and that's what's happened. And post-election, the government's now come out and announced an inquiry into the nighttime economy, and it's those words actually. It's Sydney's nighttime economy and lockout. Right? Like, that's a big thing to put Sydney's nighttime economy ahead of lockout. Of course, the prejudice comes through with the terms of reference, which are while maintaining public health and safety. They leave it at that, but it's still given us a seat at the table. Right, who's following? Has anyone heard of this inquiry? It hasn't really got the bit. Yeah, when Justin Hems brought his entourage to the proceedings, it turned a few heads, and it's impressive those heads were. Let me just tell you this: there was 800 submissions to this inquiry. That's a good number. I think that is, well, it's a new term of government, but the largest inquiry in the last term of government was 600 submissions. This is 800. And also, and if there's any reporters in the room, please go and report on this. There was 700 submissions received late, which haven't been counted as yet. So there's 1,500 submissions gone into this inquiry. They're all annexed to the last submission. Justine, if you're wondering, I found that out the other day. So there's a story in that. And what's happening now? Well, due to the collaboration of that stakeholder group, I think about 8 Nighttime Industry Association members gave evidence to Parliament, including Solitel, Australian Venuco, the Independent Bars Association. I can see Luke there. And the beauty about this really was that there was a consistent voice, a consistent narrative emerging, and that's been a real achievement. And now it is. And by number, I'm guessing it was about 70% from our side of the argument. It's the 30% on the other side, unfortunately, are what the tabloid wants, which is, the counter argument that can use language of blood on the streets and medical statistics to convey their perspective. Let me just say that. So, look, it's a tough challenge, and where we are right at the moment is inquiries happen, public hearings have happened. We are going in. There's on the 30th of September, the committee will put out its report. That then sits into Parliament, and there's sitting days in October and November. And so at that time, we'll kind of get a steer as to whether or not they will see a change. There's quite a bit of measured optimism on our side because at least they've called the inquiry. They've done it early in the term, but it it's as Matt, it turns out, would have been able to advise me. It's politics is a tough game, and keeping it front and center with decision makers with things like the abortion bill and other things is our challenge. So I guess I can talk about this for a really long time, but I guess I really wanted to try and zero in on how you might be able to help in the meantime, because you've got a duty as an industry to, I think, at this stage, remain united in our voice. That's the key thing we need to do. We need to build the movement beyond that front end of the story, which is the hospitality venues in particular. But behind all that is the supply chain. Behind that are all the artists who can perform, the culture that takes place, the contribution that the supply chain itself through some suppliers like Four Pillars. I can see Oscar there from Young Henry's, which really, to describe Young Henry's as a brewing company is just such a misstatement, really, given the cultural impact it's had on Sydney as just one example. What we can all do is to try and maintain diversity in nightlife. We need to think about offerings in Sydney that are not alcohol focused. Alcohol facilitates, as an option, a night out. That's how we need to think about booze, and practice that in the offerings that we create for customers. No short-sighted liquor promotions are just going to be disastrous at this time. Anything that is about accelerated drinking, I forget the terminology, you guys know it, but you know, anything that's sort of promoting rapid consumption of alcohol, it's just you're shooting yourself in the foot right at this point in our history. So there are a couple of things to think about. The Nighttime Industries Association is growing in members. We're 40 odd strong now. We're getting increasing support. If you'd like to join that formally, then I'm here, and Leonie, one of my team members, is here. Justine, singling me up because I can see you in the front row. Please come and see one of us. But I just would ask you that really, like, understand and tell people in this industry and the related industries that benefit from a vibrant hospitality scene that if we collaborate, we win. If we are divided, we fall. So that's my industry update on Sydney's nighttime economy. Watch this space. You'll see a lot more in the next few months.